Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the Tech Hacks from the Toolshed Campfire. We are so excited to have some wonderful presenters here with us, and I'll let them introduce themselves. Friendly reminder that right after this campfire conversation, we have a game night, sort of a choose your own adventure sort of thing, coming up afterwards. So with that, Christine, over to you.
Thank you so much, Laura, and good evening, happy campers. I hope that you're all around a campfire because it's definitely feeling like that where I am, that it's time to roast some marshmallows and make some s'mores and share some stories about leadership and culture and how that impacts us as individuals and as organizations and as a whole society. So I'm Christine Whitney Sanchez, and I'm the Chief Culture Officer at the UTO, the University Technology Office at Arizona State University. And I am so pleased to be with my newly found friend, Tracy Zimmerman. Tracy, you want to just go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Tracy Zimmerman. I'm the president at Robots and Pencils, and I'm privileged to be here with you today. And Christina and I will be sharing a little bit from our experiences and a little bit of the common ground that we've discovered together over the last couple of weeks as we got to know each other.
Exactly. So tonight's agenda is we will start with that common ground and talk about how we've both found ourselves putting it into practice in our organizations. Common ground in terms of values primarily and principles that we operate within. We're going to see how it all kind of mushes together just like a s'more. And then talk about what's now, which is when it's your turn, we'll go into breakout groups and think about the future a little bit and how organizational culture can really impact our society. And then we'll come back into plenary and do some closing thoughts and have a little Q&A.
So we're going to start out talking a little bit about our common ground. Like I said, Christine and I, we're new friends that have just met over the last couple of weeks, and we're going to share from both our organizations, how we look at culture and really propagating it through our organization. What does that mean? And really, how do we, take those practices and strengths and values and put them into practice, especially in the new challenging and dynamic environment that 2020 has brought all of us. So we started out by, exploring our opportunities and having a conversation. That was the beginning of this relationship, and we found that there were so many similar things, and we want to share them with you. And like Christine mentioned, we'll also be giving you the opportunity to reflect and apply this to your own businesses. So this is a little bit about Robots and Pencils. So we are a digital innovation firm that companies engage with to create what's next. The name of the company is called Robots and Pencils because the robots are our scientists and the pencils are our humanities people. So in our firm, we call our engineering team, our developers, robots, and we call our designers pencils. So the pencils, they literally use pencils sometimes for their work, but they do everything from information architecture and design to design thinking workshops and helping to get new ideas out of people's brains and teased into reality through working with our robots and creating amazing software. So there's a very strong philosophical approach that we need, both of those sets of perspectives inside the organization to really be successful in our work and trying to help future-proof our clients. One of our key principles inside the firm is something that we call follow the talent. And this is something that has been part of our culture and our values since the founding of Robots and Pencils. And what it's really about is, we're trying to create an environment for our team that they can thrive in, especially in our type of field where it's fast moving design, technology and stuff. No one person can keep up with what's going on. So what we were trying to do is create an environment that's healthy and enabling for our team so that essentially they can take us to where we need to go as an organization. So there are a bunch of different ways inside of our company how we think about, talent enablement, whether it comes from something like helping to drive the new markets that we enter into, the way the actual development and design work gets done, and they're also part of forming our team culture. So I'm going to share a few of those examples as well. Another key piece of the way we think about our business are our core values. And we really try to, again, have these like perpetuate through the organization. And these are, you know, some drawings done by our pencils of things that look mostly like robots. So there's still a team effort here. So one of those core values is always learning, so that we're looking and everywhere from our hiring process throughout the, you know, talent planning and throughout how we even like budget and figure out how to allocate funds and investments inside the firm. We have always learning is one of our core values, which is part of the reason why we love working with ASU, of course, is a very natural partner for us. Discipline, like doing what needs to be done, doing a great job, being reliable. Work ethic, so, you know, being focused, providing, you know, value for the time that is being spent, and just, you know, being a hard worker. I mean, we look for that, and again, throughout the process, and we recognize that throughout our organization. Efficacy, which is really about sort of doing the right thing at the right time with the right tool set. It's not efficiency, but efficiency is inside of efficacy. So we really look at how do we do things in, you know, an efficacious way. Top drawer is just about, you know, we want to bring people into the organization that we want to pick for the team, right? So we're picking people in the organization that there's no sort of like, I'm not sure if I really want this person in the organization. We work really hard to try to set up an environment where we're bringing in the strongest talent that we can. And of course, there's processes of like coaching and mentoring people when they have things they need to work on. And then the last one is really heart. So showing care for our clients, showing care for our organization, and showing care for the world. And that's how we, you know, go out into the world. And so we had quite a bit of common ground with Christine and her team.
Thanks, Tracy. No kidding. So this is our ASU Charter, which I have called the sort of magnetizing force at ASU. It brings so many people towards the campus, towards the whole organization. So ASU is a comprehensive public research university measured not by whom it excludes, but by whom it includes. And now how they succeed, advancing research and discovery of public value and assuming fundamental responsibility for the economic, social, cultural, and overall health of the communities it serves. When I first read this charter, I was walking down the mall at campus. I was doing some consulting work. It's before I came inside of ASU and became a part of the ASU family. And it literally stopped me in my tracks because almost every word represents a lot of my own values and what I hope to see in our society. Since then, I've learned that this charter has motivated almost all of my colleagues as well. And if we lose our way, we can always go back here. It's our touchstone for sure. And then the UTO values, our core values, were developed collaboratively with a group of people who were looking at how does the ASU Charter inform our work at UTO as enablers and catalysts through the power of technology and the transformation that we're helping to achieve. So we talk about this sometimes inside of our organization as RAVE. So we are relational, and that comes first. The very first part of our experience walking into UTO is starting to meet the people and know that there's a real dedication to creating the relationships that will enable us to do our very best at work. Authentic. So that is probably our most challenging value. It's the one that I think about a lot because how do you know somebody's being real? How can you tell if they're the real deal? It's an over time kind of a thing. But being asked to and challenging oneself to be authentic is a really good way to get into the present moment over and over again. We have lots of visionary thinking in our core values. If you'll go back a slide. Thanks. And people who have this ability to see far into the future. And boy, is that needed right now because we're in this very liminal space where it's really not possible to do some of the planning we used to do. We have to do quite a bit of it still, but we can't think ahead 5 years because there's so many unknowns right now. What we can do is imagine ahead 5 years and open our minds in that way. And then, like you were saying, Tracy, about the environment that you try to create, we work hard to create the conditions so that people feel empowered, take their power, and are empowering of others.
Well, Christine, I think it's the empowered thing is interesting, and we sort of say it as, follow the talent is how we encompass some very similar concepts. But, I'd like to hear from you. I think one of the most interesting things when you come into an organization where you're talking about these things and you're taking them seriously, sometimes people are like a little bit overwhelmed by it. Like some of the things that I've seen be helpful for people is, it actually takes time and coaching for them to understand to the degree that they are sort of unshackled to be able to really drive their experience, drive their work, drive solutions, work with their team, be very open and collaborative. And I'm curious from your experience, what I've observed is for many people who come here, it takes them 6 to 12 months to get used to, right? Because they're kind of like a little bit asking permission, and it's like we have to teach people to like go back and trust their judgment, and of course we have to provide them support and make sure that like things don't go off the rails. But more often I see the problem where people are like, they're asking permission too much. Like, no, this is yours to own. And then you sort of see people, come into their own. And I'm curious, you've done a bit of an org transformation here too, but how have you seen, what are some things that you've seen around that? Like, do you see that similar thing where sometimes it's almost like people are coming in and they're 30 years old and they've been through whatever types of practices and stuff in other organizations?
Sure, we all have our unconscious habits and beliefs that come with us, and so it's important to make all these things conscious in the first place. In our case, Tracy, since you guys are a little bit younger than we are, UTO's been around a little bit longer, we also have people within the organization that didn't have an opportunity coming in to learn about these things, because at the time that they came in, that really wasn't the culture. Sure. But now that it is, we have sort of a dual job, I would say. One is to make sure that as people come into our system and are onboarded, they get a feel for the UTO family. That is a little soundbite that came out of a visioning process in our Culture Weavers community of practice, that's one of our aspirations, that everybody feels valued and welcomed, and that they can bring all the gifts that they have to bear in their role. And so onboarding, helping them understand our values, giving them a few places to go where they can practice those values, because we do have a community of practice that's specifically focused on culture. And then we also embed these values into our performance evaluations. And in many ways, it's the primary way in which we help people grow. So and we start with doing the evaluation ourselves. How do I think I'm living these values? And then allow the folks that are doing the evaluation with you to give feedback as well. So I think we're pretty serious about letting people in their own time, in their own way, not just adopt, but integrate these values into their own experience at UTO.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think it's well said that it's like you just come across as being, both patient, but also encouraging people forward. So sounds like you're creating a wonderful place for people.
Yeah, thank you, Tracy. You guys too. So these are our leadership principles. About a year after we developed the positive core values that you just saw, we also began working on what we see everyone as a leader. We think of leadership as going first, taking the risk, taking a step out in front of everybody else. And that means every single employee at the University Technology Office has an opportunity to lead. And so these are our principles. In the case of Agile First, it kind of makes sense for a technology office to be thinking about agility, but we mean this in a specific way, that we have a mindset that allows us to be flexible and to know that things are changing constantly. I believe that this has been one of our primary ways that we've grounded ourselves in this work from home COVID reality, because we have absolutely so little ability at this point to put anything in stone. We have to, and it's just as well, because that's kind of a silly thing to do, especially in the tech world. And with curiosity and creativity, I'm going to speak about this in a minute a little bit more, but we are encouraging ourselves to expand out and to take on things that we might not normally take on in our roles. almost everybody at UTO has taken on something extra in beyond what they do with their technical skills. And so, for instance, we have a giving back to the community group that works really hard at touching people outside of UTO with the skills that we have inside of UTO. And the curiosity part is very important to us because we are trying, again, with the agile mindset to bring beginner's mind to everything. And that's a place of wonder, if you will. We have a culture of collaboration. I call it the conscious collaborative culture. We're resourceful and transformational in that we are always, and it's very true at a public university, we're always looking for how we can make use of the resources that we do have and invite in resources that might be kind of strange companions for us. Trusting in our teams gives them that empowerment we were talking about a little bit before, that it's okay to make mistakes. And in fact, we can't possibly grow and evolve if we don't. And we have lots of partnerships like we do with you, Tracy, and your company, that we want those to be authentic and that there's as much cultural integration there as possible. And then finally, this talent alignment doesn't mean, talent in my mind doesn't mean people. What talent means is an inherent quality that people bring with them, talents and skills. So are we helping people to do the work that aligns most closely with their own talents? So in the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, and in the expert's mind, there are few. I think that's really true, and it's an interesting, almost paradoxical thing that we are holding together. We have lots of expertise, just like you do. When you were talking about the pencils and the robots, I was thinking this kind of calling out of the value of both sides of our consciousness is a very cool thing, and to name the company that way is amazing. So Shoshin means that we bring an attitude of not knowing, basically, into any situation that we're in. This is a practice. It's not something that comes naturally for most of us who have not had a lifelong study in this.
I thought it was interesting too, Christine, when we talked about this mindset. I was having sort of a similar business analogy where Jeff Bezos talks about, every day being day one inside of an organization. He basically came in and said, he talks a lot about that inside of his culture, inside of Amazon. So like if Christine, you and I were fired tonight, and tomorrow morning we walk back in and we're newly hired into our roles, like how do we step into our organizations and assess them as if they're brand new? And it's a little bit of a yin and yang principle, I think, because the beginner's mind is like this openness, whereas the day one principle is more about taking the set of problems, acknowledging where you are, and choosing to take a fresh perspective and not saying, oh yeah, we've never done it that way here before, or yeah, we tried that before and it didn't work. And I think it's a similar concept. The way we put it into practice at Robots and Pencils is, our leadership team, which we actually, we use a lot, like we call it like the followership team, because really, we see ourselves at the bottom of the org chart, right? So we have an inverted sort of pyramid, but it's real, because if you're going to have the talent lead, my role and the role of the leadership team is, enablement of the team who's going to drive us forward and drive us future. And so actually then we call that team the day one team, to remind ourselves, like, it's our responsibility as we do, help to lead this organization of enablement for our team and unlocking their potential and getting the best out of these, our robots and our pencils, that, we need to approach each day with a fresh perspective. So I love the combination of this and with a beginner's mind, and that sort of also humanities and sciences that looks at things in really different ways, but can be on equal footing, like how you talked about in your leadership values. You're pulling from all these diverse perspectives and different experiences and trying to provide that, exposure to your team so that they can have all these different ways that, and solution sets that they can be inspired by and learn from. So anyway, I love that you incorporated this in.
Thank you. There's another thing that I see in common that, as you're talking, Tracy, that we put into practice of really encouraging people to step out of the the boundaries of their own role when they can, and not just in sort of a volunteer way. And in our organization, we are realigning the functional roles so that people so we can reconfigure as we need to, and so that it's much more fluid and responsive. I think it's a perfect time to do it with what we're working with in the remote reality.
Yeah, I can see that for sure. It's interesting because a little bit of professional services organization, that's in your DNA, right? You assemble and you reassemble around different projects and different clients. And I do think it causes a certain amount of freshness. And like you said, it's certainly not always by choice, right? People are sometimes stretching in ways that, they didn't expect. But, Tim and I were talking about this actually earlier today. It's like, they could try something out and they could hate it, and they could find something that they love and pivot into their new career. But like now they've tried it and they've had that exposure. And, especially as somebody that are, further along in our careers, you see that you look back on these experiences you have early in your career. And again, even if you didn't like this little project or rotation that you ended up, being involuntary, you learn things that you may draw on years later. So I think we have a responsibility too, as part of like, being the team that's helping to enable the talent, is to sometimes, strongly encourage those experiences. I thought it was interesting that you brought that up, that sometimes it's not all, voluntary all the time, but, it can be a great experience for people, especially if they're open-minded about it. So anyway.
One thing we do have in that regard, sorry, Tracy,
no.
It was born out of our Experience Center, which is the group of people that take all the phone calls for ASU when people need help. And that group instituted a stretch program. And so, for instance, somebody who's a quality assurance manager over at the Experience Center is also stretching with me and doing work with me on culture. So that part is voluntary.
Obviously, voluntary is great too.
Yeah.
I think everybody would love to hear a little bit more about, now you are really helping to champion this whole thing that we've all been part of this week. So I want to also say on behalf of myself and all the participants, thank you.
Oh, yes. And I must say that I have done very little. It's this amazing team of counselors and art directors and music directors. And these are all people that are doing just what we were talking about. They're stretching. They're not necessarily just doing the job that they have been hired to do. Here they are working at Learning Humans. So it's pretty exciting. I thought it was interesting that the values and sort of the principles that underpin Learning Human have so much in common with what you and I have just been talking about. And this first one, inclusivity, access, and equity, is about the biggest deal to me right now. We know that during this time we have been awakened to all the work that needs to be done on diversity and inclusion and equity and belonging. So that's been in place. These principles have been in place longer than our latest wake-up call. And we are all leaders, and we do have a student with us today who's going to help us with that student voice. He's going to ask us some questions toward the end. And why don't we go ahead and introduce you, Liam? Would you like to come into the fold?
Hi, I'm Liam. I'm a student worker with the UTO, and I'm majoring in mathematics and music.
Isn't that, speak about yeah, isn't that perfect?
Nicely.
For what you guys are doing. This next generation learning, it fits into the universal learning that is one of the principles at Arizona State University. In other words, we don't ever stop learning, and we know that the second a baby is born, they start learning. We have a sense that there's something to be added via technology, and we're working really hard at it. So those of you that might be in Verbella right now, this is an amazing, wonderful way to change the learning environment for people. Obviously, collaboration and being learner-centric, which is what the conference is all about, and increasing our digital fluency and bowing in respect to each other.
Yeah, and I wanted to point to a comment that was posted, Christine, by one of Lev's former colleagues from CSU that, they share a very, that, Lev in that role prior to coming to ASU is driving a really similar sort of vision. So Arlene, I wanted to acknowledge your comment. And, I do think it's interesting, as all of us are, educators or helping to enable education, particularly in this like tumultuous time. I mean, acknowledging the mission and vision of ASU and the criticality of, what you're providing as, and being, educating a diverse learner and making things available, and even making this, event open to, really all of us that are on board with that mission. So that's awesome, Arlene. And it's awesome to actually see all these different groups come together and help drive the vision forward. So our next step is we're going to go into, we want to hear from you, and talk a little bit about, Christine shared the goals of this event, and we're really interested in hearing about, is this what you saw and heard, or do you have any examples, or has this experience kind of, lived up? We're late in the game, right? We're Friday night. What are some of the experiences and learning that, you have had, over the last, couple of days, and what you've learned and what you plan to maybe take back?
Yes, and so as you get ready to go into the breakouts, we have facilitators that are going to be with you in the breakout sessions. So just imagine with me for a minute that we're leaving this huge bonfire that we're at right now in the plenary session. And there are a bunch of littler fires that you're going to gather around with your facilitator and share your own stories about organizational culture and leadership and how it's made a difference in your life. And so when you are ready to do the breakouts, it looks like we have about 20 minutes for people to be in breakout, and then we'll come back to the plenary for the last 10.
I think we're all popping back in through the magic of technology. I need this at my house to get all the kids to come when I call them, just shape-shift them right back into the kitchen for dinner.
Picking myself off Zoom to say LOL, that would be pretty awesome.
Exactly. I had such a great breakout session. I think the technology is like, really coming a long way, but it's easy to get like caught up in the breakout session, and then you're like, oh, I'm back here.
That was so weird, because the session I was in, Tracy, nobody said anything. We just kept looking at the screen. We kept waiting for something to happen.
You're an amazing facilitator, Paul.
I do it all with smoke and mirrors, Tracy.
Wow, it's impressive, so it's working.
Thank you.
Is Christine back?
I'm so sorry. I've been muted this whole time. I didn't realize that happened when you got popped back in. So in your breakouts, what did you learn? What did you hear and see that you want to share with other people? And you might be thinking about something that you're going to take with you and apply when you get into your own space. And we've got few enough people that I think you can just talk. You can also put it in chat, of course. Is it possible to take yourselves off mute? I'm not sure of that. Erin, yeah, they did.
We made Christine. Christine, I can report out from our group, because I think we had a really interesting discussion that was brought up around all of the different ways that we have to connect. So this idea of, we have a presentation going on, and then we have a chat channel, and then we have a Slack channel, and then we also have Virbella, and there's chat going on in there. And when is it distracting, and when is it actually like taking away from the messages that we want to be conveying in our programming? When does it feel inclusive, and when does it feel exclusive, right? Because chats sometimes happen between people who know each other really well, and they can start to feel exclusive. And then, how does this tie to some of our values around sort of inclusivity, and where inclusivity and digital literacy and digital fluency kind of meet, right? Because digital fluency is about learning how to use some of these platforms and how to engage with them, and learning, you know, how to manage our attention and upskill ourselves. But also this idea that we want to be inclusive, and sometimes these platforms, sort of the way that they people engage with them, may alienate some people. And so we just had a really interesting, got kind of deep on that set of topics in our group. But everyone really wanted to appreciate the deliberate diversity in the programming, and felt like that was something that they all really appreciated.
Thanks. Great report out. And we don't have to have the facilitators reporting out at all. If Arlene or Kelly or Robin, if you want to chime in out of our group, anything that you're taking away with you?
I think you did a great job of facilitating, so why don't you recap for us? Otherwise,
we were talking. We went from talking about the way in which this event has been deliberately grounded in sharing and openness and collegiality and empathy, and that this disruption that we're in has in a certain way created an opportunity for us to connect in different ways. There's been an outpouring of interest for all of us that were in that room in finding ways to connect. It's kind of to your point, Heather, we want to do what we can to connect without being terribly distracted if we can. And then it took a turn into how we've been trying to do some of what we're doing right now for such a long time. There were a few of us in the group that have been around a while and have seen the attempts at, especially at distance learning and remote learning now. And what is it that has made it hard for us to get the adoption and the interest and the sort of credibility that we are now seeing finally, I think, come online? And my guess is that some of that has to do with the disruption that we're in, and we're just absolutely forced. We were absolutely forced to bring our curricula online and to help the faculty figure out how to do their very best job in that modality.
yeah, I think what I'd like to add is, for me as an elder professor, how inspiring it's been to see this younger generation carry the torch for the next generation of education. I remarked on that to Lev, that he has surrounded himself with some really great younger generation folks. Very heartwarming for me. I will also say the issues that we have covered in this week have been with us for a really long time. Access, equity, competency-based faculty professional development, the use of good tools, skill-based versus education-based learning, etc. These are issues that we've struggled with, at least for the 4 decades I've been in higher ed.
You know, Arlene, not to call you out or put you on the spot too much here, but what you just said about the issues that we've been facing 20 or 30 years, you made an offhand comment in chat a couple nights ago during one of the plenaries about digital divide and how that term was making you so tired because it had a larger context. Do you remember, or can you paraphrase what you said there? Because that, for me, was one of those transformative moments.
Thank you very much, Paul. You've been so supportive.
Oh, you've been wonderful. You've inspired the hell out of me here.
I said that I'm tired of hearing the term digital divide. It's an economic divide. It's a social justice divide. It's a geographical divide. It's an economic divide. It's about access to technology and adoption with the appropriate skills. I have been working in that space for a long time. So,
and, you know, when you said that, I've been working around digital divide myself for over a decade with digital citizenship and a lot of different things. At that moment when you said that, opened my eyes in a way to a couple of things I never really thought about. One, the broader issue, as you just so eloquently put it. The second thing was how it was affecting this whole community in positive ways. We came to this, I believe, as a bunch of people who focused on ed tech, but always kept the people front and center. But it was always around the education, the ed tech. And your comment just turned me about 3,080 degrees, saying it's so much broader. And then the fact we were dealing with social justice issues at the plenary sessions, including to a certain extent tonight, made me realize this community has jumped from being an ed tech and education community to a community that's looking at social justice in a larger context within education as a framework. And I love that overnight evolution, which has probably been in the works for months and months, but I'm just too dense to have seen it before you said what you said.
I just want to make one more statement. I work with a nonprofit that I've been involved with and helped for the past 11 years called Loaves, Fishes, and Computers. We refurbish computers. We give them back out to the farm worker community at low or no cost. Since shelter in place, March 16th to today, we have given out 1,452 computers. These farm worker families line up outside our door to get these instruments that they know are essential for their children. At the same time, we are training the adults in digital literacy skills. So the need is so great, and broadband access, the whole area of this is so immense because there's still whole parts of our country, as you all have mentioned over the past week, that simply don't have access. And I'm sorry, sitting in a car with an iPhone or a smartphone is not the way you deliver education.
Right, right. Thank you. And I want to invite Tracy back in before we have to close. Do you have anything that came to you or was either part of your breakout or this whole session that you'd like to share?
Well, Christine, I mean, we had a great breakout session, and Paul was an amazing, facilitator of that group. I think that, we have a couple slides left, and I do think just to tie a bow on it, because, we're running out of time. But I think that the bottom line is, Arlene, you're bringing up, incredibly important issues and things that, like, it's going to take a lot of this beginner's mind and day one thinking to be able to solve them, right? And inside of our organizations, these are the principles and the way that the work needs to be done to be able to unlock those solutions. I believe it's communities like this that can be more open access and easier to get to and bring a broader array of perspectives, looking at how do we stay agile. Like Christine said, we can't see far ahead of time. So we need to have these we need to know change is going to happen, and we need to test and learn and test and learn. We need to unlock the potential of the people that we work with, our outside communities, our partners, our students, and, build an atmosphere of trust and this resourcefulness so that we can transform, because these are not easy problems to solve, and we're not going to solve them on this call. But, this methodology that we've had the opportunity to use tonight has unlocked things. There are things that we're doing in our organizations, and we can continue the conversation, in Slack. But I do think that this is infrastructure that we have to lay to let people feel comfortable making mistakes, feeling enabled, use these great digital tools we have like Slack and Zoom and everything else, so that we can, move forward together as a society and as a community of learning.
It's been a great pleasure to work with you, Tracy. I know this won't be the last of our conversations. And as you just said, is it down at the docks where you put the resources? We will put this slideshow there. And as you leave, if you feel so inclined, please put in the chat whatever you're taking away with you, whatever you're taking away with you this evening, and have a wonderful rest of your evening.